What's going on, San Antonio Spurs fans? Rob Parejo Jr. here, and it is the day after the Spurs have taken home the number one pick in the NBA lottery. And this is the five takeaways about what that means for the franchise. First off, we got to talk about the initial reaction. One, when it was happening, I couldn't believe it. I just kind of always prepare myself for the worst case scenario and then kind of retreat from there going back. So as soon as we made the top four, I was like, okay, everything's fine. And then when Houston got the fourth pick, I was like, everything's better than fine because the number one pick is going to be down the street in Houston. So I didn't mind that, even though they have a great spot there at four. But the reaction was just like in pure disbelief. I just was in total shock. I was in soup. I was so excited. I fell on my knees. I had my son in my hand, and I was just looking at my wife like, as those countdowns were happening, and I just dropped to the floor and was just thrilled for the best case scenario that came out for the Spurs. I always prepare myself for the worst, but to actually receive the best case scenario as a Spurs fan, in this instance, I was just in shock and couldn't believe that things are going to be changing massively. I don't know if you guys were watching the NBA draft lottery, but there were two tells before the draft actually started that gave me a really good feeling. One, they showed what was going on in that room where they showed Brian Wright, and someone just came straight up to Brian Wright, shook his hand. I'm like, why are they showing Brian Wright, and why are they showing someone shake his hand? And then second, when they were showing all the people who were at the podium for their respective team in the lottery, they showed Peter Holt Jr. And I swear he was the only guy smiling. And I know at that point he doesn't know anything, no one there knows anything, but everyone else was like locked in, stone cold, like as they announced him. Uh, and then they show, Peter Holt Jr. and he was just there all smiles. I was like, that's two signs that kind of led me to believe that something good was going to happen. I didn't know, but definitely things went good to great, very, very fast. And something that Peter Holt Jr. said after in his media press release was that he was just very excited for the fans and the Coach Pop and RC and Brian Wright, and just kind of going over the notion of good things happening to good people is always a good thing. So that's something that we should take away going through this. Now, my biggest reaction kind of was like everything happens for a reason, and this being one of the most enduring seasons for the San Antonio Spurs franchise that they've had to go through in the win-loss column. Obviously, like since 20 years ago, this is the most challenging season for Spurs fans and the coaching staff and the players to have to go through what they went through. But if you take a step back and forget about the basketball part, there was so much celebration going on with the whole celebration of the 50-year anniversary of the franchise, the return to the Alamo Dome game, which was a special night. And also, almost every home game, they were bringing back former Spurs players from the last 10, 20, 25 years, 30 years that have put on the silver and black for the franchise and actually showed them off and presented them, and it was a real showcase of the history of the city, the history of the team. Now, as all that kind of played out throughout the season, I'm just like, you know what, man, we're losing all these games, but it doesn't feel like we're losing. It feels like we're celebrating. It feels like the organization is celebrating this whole season, except for the little hiccup in the beginning of the season with Joshua Primo, that had to get settled in court. Other than that, this season was nothing but like a seance. It was like a religious experience. It was just like nothing but positive energy coming out of this organization. So for that to be taking place while all this losing was happening, my initial reaction is just like it works. It was like the longest rain dance, if you will. Like, good things happen to good people, good karma comes back to you. And I felt like no matter what happened on the court this season, this first franchise wasn't gonna let it affect the philosophy that it runs with, right? And always putting the culture first and things like that. It was just a big celebration the whole year, and then to finish it off with the cherry on top, we got that cherry. Like we got the cherry, the nuts, the chocolate, the whole Sunday, right? So we got the number one pick. So the rain dance worked, right? The celebration and the whole lighting up and down in Austin. We went to Mexico to expand there. We went to Austin and played there to expand, the whole organization's awareness and fan base. It was just a great strategic plan by the organization that I feel just they executed on perfectly, and it led to them getting the number one pick in the 2023 draft. Now, the off-court perspective is something that we definitely need to talk about before we start talking about players and who we're going to pick and all that stuff. Obviously, hopefully, what this number one pick does for the franchise is for the city is nuts. Now, I know that they talked about and also the post game presser that the Spurs are evaluated at a $2 billion organization, and with the potential of drafting Wimbayama, that goes up to 2.5 right away. So that means that more marketing, uh, more revenue coming in, more awareness coming in, more national games, and more jobs. More opportunity for the city to capitalize on this number one pick. It really is a game changer. Whereas all season and past 2 seasons, we've kind of been stuck in a rut. And I think everything's about to change for the city and the fans and the people there, and it's about to take on a whole new life. Only a few years removed after such a dynamic run with the big three, um, they're going to be relevant again. Now, if the Spurs take Wimbayama, and I'm only saying if because we have the number one pick, doesn't mean we're going to take him, even though everyone knows that we should. He's the kind of the unanimous number one pick from everyone involved. He's We're going to talk about Wimbayama in a little bit, but the point is that the Spurs are going to be relevant again from going from like one or to none to no national TV games. That's about to change, and they're about to be put back on the map in a different way from before. Because when we were good, the big three were there, but no one cared. No one cared that the Spurs were dominant in that way. Even either winning all these games, winning championship, the media still wasn't there, and that has a potential to change drastically. So we have to be ready for that. The third takeaway is about the impact that has on the franchise now. Obviously, we're planning for the future. That was not a secret. The Spurs were going to organize themselves with a plan to get them to the point where they can be successful and compete for championships down the road. And along that road, you want to acquire your pivotal franchise, player. That might happen this year, and I still say might because I don't know what the Spurs are doing. And every time I talk about, what's going on and what happened last night with the Spurs, a lot of people, a lot of the haters or naysayers, they say, yeah, the Spurs will probably trade that away or do something silly like not draft Wembayama or whatever. I'm like, look, I don't know. I don't think so, but that's why I'm just gonna, because you never know. I'm just gonna keep saying maybe. But the impact that this number one pick has now on that plan, it definitely changes some things, right? Because I think that there's a pivot point now that Brian Wright, RC, and Pop can start looking at as, what is the best move right now for the franchise. And I'm not just talking about like player personnel. Really, I don't care about the player personnel part of it right now. Like if we're going to start attracting free agents, or do we just keep, whatever, we just kind of keep building through the draft, whatever. What I would like to know, and like what I kind of want to start envisioning, is that the Spurs are going to now start operating offensively and defensively in a way that makes sense, in a way that looks like it's going to put Wimbayama, if we get him, in all the positions to be successful. Is he going to get his 10 to 20 touches a night as a rookie? All those type of deals. Are we going to go ahead and start moving towards, hey, this is what we're going to be now? Or are we going to kind of keep playing like we have for the past 2 seasons, where the ball moves around, everybody gets touches, we don't really know what we're doing at the end of games because we're just kind of doing what Boston does now. They just drive and kick and move the ball and just kind of see where the good shots come from, which is good if you have the personnel like Boston to do it. But obviously, the Spurs are using that format and that style of play to build and develop the players that they have now, because it does provide kind of an even share of opportunity and have them work on these fundamental aspects of playing the game. So there's a great pivot point that we're going to see coming next season, and it's going to be interesting to see what the now looks like after the NBA draft. And the other thing that we can talk about now a little bit is the cap space. The Spurs are one of those teams, and probably the team that has the most cap space, somewhere hovering around $40 million. So they're able to do a few things with that. they can go and try to target, a big name player. They can try to target and overpay a player maybe that they just really like and want to bring in, or they can just kind of not do anything and just kind of do what they've been doing over the past 2 years and just kind of keep that money in your pocket. And I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I definitely don't like the idea of trying to build a contender right now. Obviously, Wimbayama said after the lottery that he's trying to win a championship like ASAP, and that's all well and good, and that's good to hear from him, and that's where his mindset is. But realistically, it's not going to happen. It's not happening even this next year or 2 years. Because I think there's even a learning curve there for Victor Wembanyama when he comes to San Antonio. So what we do with the cap space now that we are in a position to compete a little bit more than we were, before it didn't make sense to really go and spend any money on any type of big player. But now it kind of does make sense to overpay for the right people and trying to bring the right players in to the organization. I would also like to see what happens with this coaching staff now, because I think all these ex guys that are expert coaches like Coach Bud or maybe even Borrego, or just whoever, Nick Nurse, all these guys that are out there, uh, maybe they would want to be a part of the Wimbayama mania and come and join the staff, Coach Pop's staff. And that also leads to Coach Pop and the whole feeling of him retiring, stepping away soon. We all kind of thought maybe soon. We don't know when that's going to happen. I would say it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Um, but very interesting when it does, to see who takes the reins at that point. The fourth takeaway from last night was shaping the draft process. So we have our cornerstone potential player in Wimbayama potentially. I think the Spurs are still going to do their due diligence during the draft. They're still going to work out players. They're still going to maybe see if they want to trade up to try to get some players, trade a couple assets from the future to try to maybe get someone now, or just create their player profiles so later down the line, if any of these players become available, they know who they are and what their characteristics are, and if they want to bring them into the organization post the NBA draft. Because as of right now, we have our first round pick, we have our second round pick, and so we still got to do all the due diligence for those for the second round pick. And that the Spurs aren't going to leave any stones uncovered unless we get a report soon that says, hey, they're going to take Victor Wembanyama number one. The Spurs are going to do it. It's said and done, and that happens sometimes. So maybe. And we have about 13 future first round picks, 19 future second round picks through 2029. So I would like to see the Spurs kind of go about this the OKC way, take the next 3 or 4 years to keep drafting the best type of talent that we can get, and especially if it fits with Wembayama, if we take him, that's kind of how the draft kind of shapes out. The process now becomes like, okay, we know what we're doing, and now let's draft the best players available. Not just let's just draft the best players available and fit wise and see what happens. No, we actually have a direction. So before, I think we're kind of shooting from the hip in the draft over the next few years. Now we have like a scope and an aim at where we want to be. And on the current court, on the court predictions, going to wrap this up really quick. Devin Vassell, the thoughts that I have of Vassell playing with Victor, Victor's just going to unlock what Devin can do, and Sohan's going to feed as well. So I'm very interested to see how those two guys, especially Vassell, plays next year next to Wembanyama, and see if he can capitalize on all those open looks. Let me know what you think down below.